When my husband was hospitalized, his sister took control of our bank accounts. She told me coldly, "You were just a paper wife. You'll leave with nothing." His parents nodded, "We're protecting our blood." I found a hidden folder in his office with letters, videos, and a confession he never sent them. That night, I uploaded it all to the group chat. The next day, they showed up at my door screaming because I still remember the way the air felt that night. Heavy, thick, like the whole world was about to crack open. It was a Tuesday, one of those nights where nothing seems out of the ordinary until everything is. Daniel had made spaghetti for dinner, humming softly as he stirred the pot. We were sitting down to eat when it happened. He clutched his chest, his face went pale, and he just collapsed. I called 911, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. He made it to the hospital, but he wasn't conscious. The doctors said it was a massive heart attack. They weren't sure when, or if, he'd wake up. I spent the first few nights in the hospital, sitting by his bed, holding his hand, whispering that he had to pull through. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there, numb, watching the monitors beep. But on the third day, Rachel walked in like she owned the place. She didn't even look at Daniel. She just stood there, arms folded, eyes cold. "We need to talk about the bank accounts," she said, her voice sharp, like a knife. I blinked at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" She sighed, like I was an idiot. "Daniel's accounts. His assets. The lawyer gave me temporary control over everything. Given his condition, someone had to step in." My heart dropped. "I'm his wife. I should be handling this." Rachel's lips curled into a smirk that made my stomach churn. "You were just a paper wife. A placeholder. You'll leave with nothing." I felt like the floor had opened up under me. Then Daniel's parents walked in behind her. His mother, Margaret, crossed her arms, looking at me like I was dirt under her shoe. His father, Carl, just stared, his face tight and unreadable. Margaret spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "We're protecting our blood. You've had your fun, but this family's money stays with the family." I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came out. I went home that night feeling like I'd been gutted. I sat in the dark, staring at the walls, trying to process what just happened. I wanted to believe they were bluffing, that Daniel would wake up and fix everything. But deep down, I knew better. They had always hated me. Always treated me like an outsider. They never hid it, either. That's when the rage kicked in. I wasn't going to sit back and let them rob me. I started digging. I spent hours going through Daniel's files, every drawer, every folder. I almost gave up when I noticed an old, worn folder shoved behind some tax papers. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Handwritten, typed, even some that looked like drafts. They were all addressed to Rachel, Margaret, and Carl. I read the first one, my hands shaking. "Mom, Dad, Rachel. I know you've never accepted my marriage. But I need you to understand, she's not what you think. She's been my rock, my partner, my best friend. I know you think she's after my money, but you're wrong. I've seen the way you manipulate, the way you scheme. That's why I changed my will. You won't get a dime." I felt like I couldn't breathe. I kept reading. There were letters about how they had pressured him for loans, guilt-tripped him into giving them money for their emergencies that never ended. He talked about how Rachel had tried to convince him I was cheating on him, how Margaret had told him I was only with him for the money. There were videos, too. I plugged in the USB drive and watched, stunned. Daniel sat in his office, looking tired but determined. His voice was low, steady. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, or I can't speak for myself. Let me make it clear, everything I have, everything I've built, goes to my wife. She's the only one I trust. Rachel, Mom, Dad, you've taken enough from me. Don't try to take what's hers. I watched the videos over and over, my stomach in knots. It was like a dam broke inside me. That night, I uploaded everything, the letters, the videos, all of it, to the family group chat. I didn't think. I just hit send and watched it go. The next morning, they showed up at my door, and they were livid. Rachel was at the front, her face twisted in rage. She was screaming so loud I'm surprised the neighbors didn't call the cops. "You had no right," she shrieked, pounding on the door. Margaret was yelling too, her voice shrill. "You're trying to ruin us. You manipulative little bitch." Carl just stood there, his arms crossed, staring at me like he wanted to crush me. I opened the door, leaned against the frame, and stared them down. I didn't say a word, I told them, my voice calm and low. "Daniel did. Don't like it? Take it up with him." Rachel looked like she was about to lunge at me, but Carl held her back. They stood there for a minute, breathing heavy, their faces twisted with anger, and then they left. But I knew it wasn't over. That afternoon, I got a call from Daniel's lawyer. He told me Daniel had updated his will 6 months ago. Everything was left to me, everything. The house they lived in, the properties, the bank accounts. I didn't say a word. Let the storm come. The storm hit hard. Rachel must have thought she could scare me into backing down, but I wasn't the woman they thought I was. The next day, she showed up again, this time with a lawyer. They didn't bother to knock. They pounded on the door like they were the police. I opened it just enough to look them in the eye. Rachel's voice was sharp, her tone full of fake legal-sounding threats. "We're contesting the will. You forged it. You manipulated Daniel when he was sick." Her lawyer, a balding man in a cheap suit, nodded stiffly, acting like I should be terrified. I didn't even flinch. "Everything's in Daniel's own words. His letters. His videos. You want to go to court? Fine. Let's go to court." Rachel's mouth tightened into a thin line. She wasn't expecting that. For the next few weeks, it was hell. They filed motions, tried to freeze the accounts, claimed I was alienating family assets. They even tried to paint me as some kind of gold digger who had preyed on Daniel while he was vulnerable. I sat through deposition after deposition, letting their lawyers hammer me with questions. They tried to pick apart my relationship with Daniel, dragging out every little fight we'd ever had, every disagreement, every time I'd spent money without asking. But I had something they didn't, the truth. Every time they tried to attack me, I had the videos. The letters. Daniel's own words, talking about how they manipulated him for years. And every time they showed up at my door, screaming, I just stayed calm. I let them rant. Let them threaten. I knew the law was on my side. Then the real twist hit. Daniel's lawyer found a file in the safe deposit box, one even I hadn't seen. It was a detailed breakdown of every single dollar Daniel had ever loaned his family over the years. Tens of thousands to Rachel for her business that never existed. 50 grand to Carl when he was between jobs. 25,000 to Margaret for medical bills that magically vanished. It was a damning list. And Daniel had written a note at the bottom, "Consider these gifts, not loans." But they stop here. Do not ask for more. When the court saw that, their case crumbled. But it didn't end there. Daniel had also written a final letter, sealed, marked to be opened only if they contest the will. The judge read it out loud in court. I'll never forget the silence in that room. "Mom, Dad, Rachel, if you're trying to challenge my wishes, stop now. I've made my decisions. You've taken enough. If you continue, I'll make sure the world knows exactly who you are." The letters, the videos, they're all backed up. I've left instructions for my lawyer to release them publicly if you push this further. Don't test me. Their faces went pale. Rachel actually broke down crying in the courtroom, sobbing into her hands. Margaret just sat there, stone-faced, while Carl stared at the floor. But I wasn't done yet. There was still the matter of the house they were living in, the one Daniel had left to me. I gave them 30 days to vacate. No extensions. No negotiations. Rachel called me every day, begging for more time. She even showed up at my door once more, looking like a shell of herself. Please. I have nowhere to go, she said, her voice shaking. I stared at her for a long moment. You said I was just a paper wife, I told her quietly. You said I'd leave with nothing. But you were wrong. Now it's your turn to leave with nothing. And I shut the door in her face. The last I heard, they moved into a tiny apartment across town. Carl had to sell his truck. Rachel's car got repossessed. Margaret, well, I'm not sure where she ended up. I stayed in the house. I kept Daniel's things just the way they were, at least for a while. Sometimes, I'd sit in his office, reading those letters again. Reminding myself that even though he was gone, he fought for me. And in the end, I fought for him. The weeks after the court decision felt like a slow, rolling thunderstorm that hadn't quite broken yet. I tried to settle into a routine. Quiet days in the house, working remotely, checking in at the hospital to see if there was any change in Daniel's condition. The doctors said it could take weeks or months for him to wake up, or he might never wake up at all. But Rachel and her parents, they didn't stop. I'd see them lurking around the property, watching from across the street in their cars. Sometimes Rachel would come to the door, knock, and then leave when I didn't answer. Once, Carl tried to block my car in the driveway, just sitting there with the engine running, glaring at me through the windshield like he was waiting for me to make the first move. I started locking everything, even during the day. But it wasn't enough. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing, and grabbed my phone to call 911. When I crept downstairs, I saw the living room window smashed in, glass all over the floor. Rachel was standing in the yard, screaming at the top of her lungs. You stole everything. You lying bitch. This was supposed to be ours. She was throwing rocks at the house, her hair wild, her face twisted in fury. Carl was there too, standing back with his arms folded, watching like it was a show. Margaret was in the car, looking straight ahead, as if none of it was happening. I told the dispatcher what was happening, my voice shaking. By the time the cops arrived, Rachel was on the ground, sobbing, screaming about how I had ruined her life. They arrested her for trespassing and vandalism. Carl didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at me as they cuffed her. His eyes were dark, hollow, like something inside him had snapped. I pressed charges. I didn't want to, but I had to. They weren't going to stop otherwise. A few days later, I got a call from the hospital. Daniel had opened his eyes. I rushed there, heart pounding. When I walked into his room, he was awake, but groggy, his eyes fluttering. Hey, baby, I whispered, tears flooding my eyes. He blinked at me, his voice raspy. What happened? I didn't tell him everything right away. I just told him he had been sick, and I'd been taking care of everything. But a few days later, when he was stronger, I showed him the folder. The letters. The videos. His own words. I'll never forget the way his face twisted when he watched the videos of himself. The way his jaw tightened when I told him about the court case, the harassment, the broken window. They did this? He whispered, his voice low and hard. Yeah, I said. They tried to take everything. He sat there for a long time, silent. Then he said, it's time we finish this. Daniel wanted to handle it himself. So he made a decision, one I never saw coming. He called his lawyer and drafted a new document. A public statement, addressed to everyone. He wrote about the manipulation, the lies, the years of pressure from his family. How they had used him, tried to ruin his marriage, and finally tried to steal his legacy while he lay unconscious in a hospital bed. He sent the statement to the local newspaper. The article hit the front page of the city paper, Prominent businessman exposes family's financial abuse in shocking letter. The fallout was brutal. Rachel's employer fired her. The church Margaret had been a part of for 20 years cut ties with her. Carl's side business lost clients overnight. People knew. Daniel didn't stop there. He filed a civil lawsuit against Rachel and Carl for harassment and damages. The videos and letters were part of the case file, open for the public to see. When the trial began, they tried to deny everything, but it was useless. The evidence was overwhelming. I sat in the courtroom, watching Rachel sob on the stand, watching Carl glare at Daniel like he wanted to kill him. Margaret never showed up, she couldn't handle the humiliation. Daniel didn't hold back. He spoke clearly, his voice strong. I loved my family. I trusted them. And they tried to destroy my life. My wife stood by me when I couldn't speak for myself. They tried to take everything from her. They failed. The judge ruled in our favor. Rachel and Carl were ordered to pay damages. They had to sell what little they had left. Rachel's car was gone. Carl's tools were repossessed. Margaret's name was mud in the community. They were left with nothing. And we? We got everything. Daniel came home from the hospital a different man. There was a hardness in him now, like a part of him had calcified from the betrayal. The first few days, we barely spoke. He'd sit in his office for hours, staring at the walls, going through the letters and videos like he was trying to piece himself back together. Then, one afternoon, he looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "They don't get to walk away from this. None of them." And he meant it. The first domino fell with Rachel. She'd been fired after the newspaper article exposed her, but she still tried to save face, acting like she was a victim. She posted on Facebook, whining about family betrayal and how she was unfairly targeted by lies. Daniel had been quiet, until then. He uploaded a video to his own page. It was Daniel, sitting at his desk, holding up the folder. "These are the letters I wrote over the years. The videos I made. They were meant to protect my wife from my family's manipulation, and now I'm sharing them publicly because no one should have to live in fear of the people who are supposed to love them." He read the list out loud, every dollar Rachel had begged for, every lie Carl told, every fake illness Margaret claimed. He spoke plainly, with no anger, just cold facts. That video went viral. People shared it all over town. The comments flooded in, people expressing shock, disgust, and support for us. Rachel's friends dropped her like a hot stone. She lost her apartment when her roommate kicked her out. The final blow? Her ex, the father of her kid, saw the video and used it in court to get full custody. Rachel didn't just lose her family's support, she lost her child. Carl wasn't spared either. His reputation as a respected small business owner was shredded. The court ordered him to pay us $75,000 in damages. When he couldn't, they garnished his pension. He tried to sell his truck and tools to make a dent, but it wasn't enough. Margaret tried to hide. She stopped showing her face at church. But Daniel wasn't done. He had one last letter, the one she never knew existed. It detailed how she had pressured Daniel into co-signing a loan years ago for a property she later defaulted on, ruining his credit in the process. Daniel submitted it to the IRS with a full report. Turns out Margaret hadn't been paying taxes on that property income. An audit was launched. Margaret was hit with a massive tax lien and penalties. They froze her bank accounts. She ended up selling the family's heirloom jewelry just to cover the initial payments. The best part? The house they all thought they'd live in forever, the one Daniel left to me, was now mine. I gave them exactly 30 days to get out, no exceptions. On the last day, I sat in the driveway, coffee in hand, watching as they hauled boxes into a beat-up rental truck. Rachel shot daggers at me with her eyes. Margaret wouldn't look at me at all. Carl gave me one last glare, the kind that said, "This isn't over." But it was. I waited until they were gone, then I walked through the house. Every room felt like it had been washed clean. The air felt lighter. Daniel and I had the locks changed that afternoon. But there was one last twist. A few months later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Rachel. Her voice was shaking, small, like a trapped animal. "Please, can you help me? I'm living in a motel. I can't find a job. I haven't seen my kid in weeks. Please." I let her talk. Let her beg. Then I said the same words she said to me in that hospital waiting room. "You were just a paper sister. A placeholder. You'll leave with nothing." And I hung up. Daniel heard the whole conversation. He didn't say a word. Just took my hand and squeezed it. That night, we sat on the porch, quiet, watching the sunset. The house was ours. The money was ours. The future, ours. And as for the family that tried to destroy us, they were scattered, broke, and forgotten. Daniel and I rebuilt, stronger than ever. But I'll never forget what it took to get here. Sometimes, revenge doesn't come in a single moment. It comes slowly, piece by piece, as the people who tried to ruin you end up choking on their own poison. And in the end, they all paid. Every last one of them. Even me, because I learned the hard way that trusting the wrong people can cost you everything. And I'll never make that mistake again.